This is Creek with At the Table Podcast. Here at the Table Podcast, our goal is to break down biblical topics, make Scripture easy to understand, and to glorify God and His Word. We pray this content edifies, challenges, and blesses you. So without further ado, sit back and join us at the table.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of At the Table Podcast. It's me, Trey, with my co-host, John and Creek, as always, coming to you, bringing the word from the table to your table. Fill up your cup and eat some bread, right?
Amen.
Sure. Yeah, it is us. And it is both good and morning.
Hopefully we do fill up your cup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only God can do that. Remember that scene off The Chosen? Yeah. Rabbi, you make us whole. Only God can do that.
Have you seen the newer episode where the withered hand?
Negative.
Oh.
It's coming out in season 4 or 5, whichever one.
I thought it came out in season 3.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the withered hand.
Yeah.
The guy in the synagogue with the withered hand. He said, if he was supposed to be healed, God would have done it. He said, interesting point you make.
Yeah. Funny you should mention that.
I do like the way they portray that because I do picture Jesus a little bit as kind of a, the thug life glasses, just like waiting for chances for him to just like be a little bit sarcastic but also truthful.
Have you guys seen any of season 4 yet?
I'm watching it as it comes out on the app.
I haven't seen it. I haven't even seen
If
season 3.
a creator of The Chosen is listening, please listen to me.
Listen.
Releasing 3 episodes at a time in the theater is too much. I can't sit in the theater for 4 hours. So I didn't watch them in the theater. So I'm just watching them as they come out on the app. But they're fire. Like,
Yeah.
I liked that one. The special effects on the hand coming back, that was radical.
Dude. I mean, I know, The Chosen is The Chosen. But those first 2 episodes of season 4,
yeah, dude.
they're fire.
I love the sarcastic moments. There's God would have healed an interesting point you make.
Are you watching them as they come out on the app, or did you watch them on the theater?
The second one we watched via YouTube live stream whenever they live streamed it.
Yeah.
But because I think he said it's the only way that episode 2 could have been like rewound is if you watched the live version on YouTube. That was probably just outdated information.
Yeah, because I think the app has it all now. But but it like shows the high priest and stuff. It's like so corrupt. Like it's crazy, dude.
I know. I'm like, man, with old Shmuel, you know what I mean? Like he's starting to show like potentially a little bit of remorse for being a BH.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself in Shmuel, whatever his name?
Oh my gosh.
Hey, bro, this guy wants to continue.
For those that are just catching this on air, we had about an hour conversation off air about childhood memories and the way that people just see things differently.
Yeah, the way that people have wildly different
Or the way
accounts of
that
things.
people don't see anything at all.
It is amazing to me how 2 brothers can have wildly different stories.
Dude, I was just telling the Clark boys that. I'm like, have you guys ever noticed that when you tell the same story, the details never, ever converge? Like, Noah will say, yeah, Elijah came into my room and tried to wrestle me. And then Elijah will be like, you knocked on my door and tackled me onto my bed. Yeah, but you tried to wrestle me. Those are in no way the same thing. Like, how did you come up with that?
That's because younger brothers typically have a habit of trying to embellish certain things to make themselves look better and to make other people look equally as bad.
I've noticed that there's a singular
Wonder
talent
which one did which in this case.
that the older brothers usually have, and it's to contrive fantasy altogether. It's not to
I will
embellish
say
detail. They implant details into the story that don't even exist.
I love my brother Trey. I really do.
Okay.
But
I don't like the way you started that at all.
You could be a
Let's do this.
politician, dog. Like, you'd be good at debating and arguing. And like,
I didn't do that. I don't remember it.
I'm just now hearing this for the first time. I could do it.
what's the quote that you quoted earlier about him apologizing?
I don't know.
He said, "If I am wrong."
Oh yeah, if I'm ever wrong, I will apologize. That hasn't happened yet. Hopefully, it never will. Maybe sometime in the great future. But
Dog, you are a debater. Like, I feel like I could give you any topic, even if you know you're wrong.
You know, that was the one thing that at my graduation, that like the one positive thing a teacher said about me. They were like, "Well."
They used that in a positive connotation?
Yeah, well, maybe. He said he has great conviction about what he thinks he's right on. That was basically the one thing that they said that was good.
Who was your speaker?
Chad Knight and Mr. Rod.
Dang.
Rip.
Mr. Rod's the one that said that.
Oh.
He was my history teacher. It was before he was principal.
Right on. Right on.
Hey,
That's great
I took it,
conviction.
hey,
Rip.
He's not the principal. He's superintendent.
whatever he is.
Yeah.
That was after my time. But
But
it was pretty. I was like, that's the one thing. You want to know what a real miracle is? This is, and it's a sign. It should maybe be written in my autobiography. I don't know. I graduated with a 3.7. I have no idea how that's possible.
I was gonna say, really?
Because, dog, I don't know if I did one sheet of homework. I don't know if I did one sheet of homework the entire time in high school.
It's not even that I think he's
Wow.
dumb.
I don't think I did.
It's
Just
just like
lazy.
I can't, like the way you've described yourself in high school, I can't picture you getting a 3.7. Like, you seem like the kid that does not
It's hard to
care.
receive.
Kid that doesn't care, doesn't want.
I test well. You know, some people have the
Yeah.
opposite problem. Some
Yeah,
people, they're incredibly intelligent, but when it comes to a test, they just bomb it. They just suck at it.
Right.
Me, I will bomb everything else, but when that test comes, baby, hundreds. Nothing but hundreds. I don't know why. It's part of it's like a, what do they call that? When I read something, I don't forget it. I
Photographic
retain,
memory.
kind of, but only when I read. If I watch a video, I'm going to sleep. It ain't going to happen. But if I read something, I won't forget it. And it makes me look smarter than I am. But really, it's just a good memory. So.
Yeah. You've got the gift of a good memory. Gee, look at the time.
You're kind of bitter today. I don't know if we can
I'm
handle
not
this.
bitter.
He is bitter.
I'm not bitter. I'm careful.
You know what needs to happen? We'll do a short episode, and I'll bring Dad into this. And let's let him test us to see who's true.
No, we got to bring Mom in.
Yeah, you're right.
She's got the better memory.
It was all hidden from Dad, except for the one event. Everything else was pretty well hidden from him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Golly.
Mom would have to be the one. Yep.
Well, it's not that it was all hidden from him, but I feel just based on marriage, like my wife's more likely to accurately recount details, dates, and times than I am.
Dad's going to listen to this. You're getting a phone call for that.
Dad's probably going to admit that. You trying to tell me you've never got the Tuesday with a green T-shirt at 2:00 remembering spiel from your spouse?
All the time when it's not true.
and been left completely.
Let me tell you something about women. They take advantage of the fact that they think that you won't remember, and they'll make up details.
Nah.
My wife will say, "You never told me that." I'm like, "No, I did. I told you that."
You
Nope.
kind of onto something.
No, you didn't. You know I'm right, and
But
you're not
you
saying it
also-
right now because your name will never be remembered for your cowardice unless you agree with me right now.
Because, dude, for real, like, yeah, it's the same thing. I'm like, I really remember I don't remember doing that.
You don't think there's both? You don't think there's sometimes that you?
No, there is, but that's
He's
what
like,
I'm saying.
If there was, I would say, but there's never been.
I'm just saying that they take advantage of that, dude.
Tell me you don't see that, dude.
They take it. We need a word from the producer. Do they take advantage of that? They do. 100%. Sage, co-sign me, and you need to as well.
I did, but I'm saying the other happens too,
Yeah, it happens all the time.
and probably more often than not
It's like the cliche when
in
they
my
say
household.
she complained that I never listened or something.
Something like
I
that.
can't remember.
I know.
Uh,
Well, yeah.
I didn't really hear. You know.
There's sometimes, especially if I'm watching a funny reel on my phone, my ears are like glass.
Facts.
Everything bounces off of me.
That yes, but they should know that. If my attention is somewhere else, do not talk to the side of my head because I won't hear you.
But the problem is that our heads are often everywhere else.
Well, then you have to give me a little something. Bring me in. If you don't bring me in, I'm not hearing anything. It's gone.
Dangle the bait in front of me, and I'll follow.
Have you seen? I have a carrot and a stick.
Yeah.
Do you want the carrot or do you want the stick? You either get the good bait or I beat you with a stick.
Dang.
Speaking of beating with a stick, we probably better move on.
Wow, dude.
Wow.
I don't really know how to take this. I don't know how to respond to all that.
Dad, when you listen to this episode, hopefully you still do, and we haven't lost you with all of our ideas. But if you're still listening, you'll know that reference. Okay, moving on. Let's go ahead and let's jump into the episode. Oh, but before we do, I do want to say a huge thank you to
You're welcome.
To
Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say?
to two wonderful people that helped back end a lot of this
Back
stuff.
end.
One of them is Savannah, the other one is Sage. Doing an incredible job helping produce this stuff. I told them both, put that on your resume, because you're producing a show. That's what you're doing, and it is a legitimate thing for a resume.
Yeah, legitimate. Yeah.
Dude, I mean, how could it be more than
Sage.
yeah? It's
Sage is a beast, so is Savannah.
it's a public.
I just don't.
thing. Yeah.
I don't know if they want to be associated with this on a resume.
Oh, dang, dude.
Oh my gosh. Dude, you cannot cut my legs out like that, dude. You're a villain.
I think that's proverbially like all of our legs in a way.
Yeah, but I was the one building us up, and then he just at the knees, dude.
You know, I got one more story before we jump into the show.
Oh boy.
You speaking of cutting people's legs out and hitting them with a branch. This is one of my funniest
I never
memories.
said that. I said a stick.
Okay, fine. A stick.
You're adding.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
You're leading this that direction.
Branch was the more accurate description of that, I think.
Okay.
So, do you guys remember those old Castrol? I think it was either Castrol Edge or Castrol GTX commercials where they had that Irish dude. He's like, "You got to think with your dipstick, Jimmy."
Scottish, yeah.
Yeah, Scottish. Dude, you remember those? Creek?
What a thing
Did you
with
ever
that
see that?
dipstick, Jimmy.
So so this guy would come out from O'Reilly's or Castrol or whatever.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it was Castrol, and he'd
Someplace.
see you with some generic bottle of oil, and he'd have this oil dipstick, and he'd freaking whip you right across the back of the legs. Wham!
Right on the old
You got to
tuchus.
think with your dipstick, Jimmy. Every time you bought a different oil other than Castrol. Well, a friend and I in high school, as guys often do, played pranks on each other that caused great amount of physical pain.
Was this Derek Wilson?
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, long story short, we're walking down the street, and I see this stick on the ground, probably about the thickness of a $50.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Now-
past the rule of thumb, dog.
Now, it was a dead branch, and I knew that. But I seen that, and it's almost like the enemy whispered in my ear,
I've had that.
like, that commercial, dude. And I'm like, I got to try it. He's none the wiser. He's like 5 yards in front of me. So I got like 3 long steps with a backswing. I drew back from Texas, dude.
God,
And I was like, you got to think with your dipstick, Jerry. Freaking broke him over the back of his legs. He was like,
it sounds like one of those Romans on the Passion movie.
dude.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, man.
What are they speaking Italian or something? Like they're shouting things.
I'm not. I remember the words, but I'm not going to say them. I'm not feeding into this.
I feel like that he started that off trying to say that the stick was like dead and rotten, but I feel like that it ended up being tougher than what he thought. And
You
I
guys
could just picture like Derek kind of cutting about a half backflip after his legs get swept plumb out from underneath him.
Do you guys remember that bit we talked about earlier about the gift that older brothers have of injecting fantasy into stories that doesn't exist? You're hearing some of that right now.
Da da da! I can't remember what they say, but it's brutal. And you do have a long history with those sticks, dude. You are a freaking abuser.
I can't stand this dude.
He does. Now he's talking out of his own mouth. So that should just shadow and just
This
tint
dude,
a little bit what we talked about earlier.
he hit me in the kneecap with a rubber mallet in biology. You ever been smacked in the kneecap with a rubber hammer?
I feel like that's a doctor thing, isn't it?
Not in the kneecap, like smacked, like not
like he grabbed the mallet and boom, rocked me with it.
I have some stories about Derek too, but I will not ever tell them on the air.
Yeah, that's
They're
wise.
weird. He's a weird kid.
Well, and there's one thing in particular that about ended your life doing to him when Dad seen you do it. You remember we were roofing that building?
Dude, this was a moment of stupidity. What?
Great
We
amount.
may have to edit this out.
Big volume.
But a drill with a bit on it. Derek was being a punk like he always was. But I loved the kid. He was just a punk. You know it. He was. But
It sounds like you were a punk.
I was a punk. I had this drill. We had a bit in it, and for some reason, we were talking smack back and forth, and I went to like kind of poke him, but I wasn't actually going to hit his chest. Okay, I was just in his direction, just pulling the trigger, and it grabbed his shirt and sucked the drill bit into his chest. My dad was on the roof.
Okay, not into his chest.
No,
Let's
okay,
clarify.
yeah.
Did it cut his skin?
No.
Scratch maybe a little abrasion.
Little abrasion.
Small abrasions. But anyway, my dad was so mad. He grabbed a freaking piece of 2x4. He was on the roof working and just chucked it at me. He missed for anyone that would try to use it.
I'm pretty sure he missed on purpose. He was trying to get your attention.
But I thought he was trying to hit me at the time.
And he got it. He got my attention.
And looking
You're
back,
a goober, bro.
I don't think he threw a 2x4.
it was a piece of wood.
It was a
some
piece of
sort,
wood.
like a scrap wood.
It
But
wasn't a 2x4.
I don't really know what it was, to be
Yeah.
honest. It was a large wooden object. So if we're honest, Dalton's history with the branches, he comes by honestly.
You notice, okay, again.
We're at 15 minutes.
Yeah,
We got to go.
Yeah, we're going to do a podcast
John,
on childhood
what
debates,
is
dude.
at the table today?
Boy. Man, oh man, oh man. Well, what is at the table today is another day in our Snake Crusher series in the life of Jesus in the New Testament.
Hoorah.
In the last episode, we were in Luke chapter 8, so we'll be picking up in Luke chapter 9 for this one. And let's just go ahead and start in verse 18. So in terms of time frame from Luke, this is like in the same general time frame as the last episode, positioned sometime after the feeding of the 5,000. Now it happened that as he was praying alone, which is Jesus, the disciples were with him, and he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" And they answered, "John the Baptist, but others say Elijah, and others say that one of the prophets of old has risen." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "The Christ of God." And he strictly charged and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised." And he said to all, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul?
Yeah.
For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his glory and the glory of the Father and the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God." Something I really like, and I want to go to this, is Mark's particular account and verbiage of the way that this story unfolds too. Because he provides a lot of context for a lot of what we're going to talk about in today's episode. And if you're in Mark chapter 8 and verse 27, it says, "Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi." So we're in the region of Upper Galilee at this time. "And on the way, he asked his disciples, 'Who do people say that I am?' And they told him, 'Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say one of the prophets.' And he asked them, 'But who do you say I am?' And Peter answered him, 'You are the Christ.' And he strictly charged them that they should tell no one. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said this plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come to me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in exchange for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of the Father and his holy angels." So we're not going to go there. But in one account of this confession of Jesus being the Christ at Caesarea Philippi, this is where Simon, the son of Jonah, is sort of famously renamed Peter by Jesus.
Yeah, Petra.
Yeah, which means rock. And Jesus gives this statement, "On this rock." Now keep in mind the region. We're in Caesarea Philippi. And Jesus says, "On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, or the gates of hell, will not prevail against it. The gates of death won't prevail against it." And, well, first of all, Jesus is called the Messiah by his disciples, the Christ. He's called God, or God's Son, and he doesn't deny it. So for the interest of our Snake Crusher series, there's that for you. But this particular place of Jesus being called the Christ and this confession, and then Jesus says, "It is on this confession of me as Lord, the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against what I build my gathering
The foundation.
on." Yeah, it's the foundation for the building of him constituting a people group. Now let's continue. Mark chapter 9, verse 1. "And he said to them, Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God after it has come with power." So this particular verse for a very long time has kind of caused some enigma for people, but I think the explanation is embedded within the story, and we'll unfold that. It follows in verse 2, "After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, so as no fuller on earth could whiten them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. For he did not know what to say, for they were terrified.
Yeah.
And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud, This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. And suddenly, looking around, they saw no one any longer, but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead might mean. And they answered him, Why do the scribes say that Elijah first must come? And he said to them, Elijah does come first to restore all things. And how it is written of the Son of Man that he should suffer many things and be treated with contempt. But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did to them whatever they pleased, as it was written. So we're going to park on this this episode that's famously called the Transfiguration, or the Mountain of Transfiguration, for a while. So just highlighting a few details. Sort of the first thing we want to discuss is location, where this mountain is at, what scholars say. And without pulling and quoting a ton of material at length, I'm just going to give you what this podcast holds as the view. There's a very large consensus of very good scholarship that holds this view.
Dr. Judd Burton's one of the people who's really good with this material.
And he actually touched on this a little bit in his episode with us, Giants, Demons, and Aliens. Yeah, with Dr. Judd Burton. So forgive the audio quality. We've grown a lot since then. Go back and listen to his content.
Come on.
Or check out him on other podcasts, and he talks about this at length. But the short explanation as far as location goes, this podcast puts forward, we would like to submit to you that the location of the Mount of Transfiguration is Mount Hermon. And the reason why is we take we take some details that are given to us, especially in the Gospel of Mark. Luke doesn't give as much detail, but in the Gospel of Mark, he gives us some details that kind of make scholars think, okay, I think this is it. Well, first of all, Mount Hermon is described, the mountain in the text is described, he takes Peter, James, and John by themselves with him to a high mountain.
Yeah.
We know, because of the previous chapter, that the region that they're in are the villages that make up the region of Caesarea Philippi.
Yeah.
And Caesarea Philippi is in the region of Galilee, not too far actually from the Sea of Galilee, otherwise known as the Sea of Tiberias in your scriptures. It was renamed that because of the Emperor Tiberius. But Mount Hermon is the tallest mountain range that overlooks that area.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why that's sort of put forward, is we know, like, okay, well, it's a high mountain. So Mount Hermon is a high mountain, a really high mountain. It has many peaks, right?
Yeah.
But also its location. It's right next to Caesarea Philippi proper. In one of the other Gospels' account of this, Jesus says the gates of Hades will not prevail against his church.
Yeah.
Or this confession of his lordship in his church. There's a spot right at the base of Mount Hermon in Caesarea Philippi that historically is known as the gates of Hades.
Yeah. So, for our listeners, you should be pretty familiar with this, but just in case you're just catching this episode, just kind of coming into it, there's a lot of history with this mountain. For those of us that hold like the Genesis 6, the non-Sethite view, the supernatural view of that mingling of the sons of God and the daughters of men, that union, that coming down, the place where the oath was broken, that happens at Mount Hermon. They descend on Mount Hermon, and that's where they kind of enter the world at. And so all through the ages, this place is known by every occupant of the area, whether it's the native people or people who come in and are like, interminglers or occupiers. This place is always known for this, and it becomes, through the ages, many different centers for many different gods. So, like temple worship, and especially the gates of Hades. At this current time, and this, like I said, more credit to Dr. Judd Burton. He does a lot of really, really good scholarly work on this. But at this point, it is a grotto to Pan, so the goat god, which for like Christendom, that kind of has its own little, semblance, cultic semblance. But the gates of Hades is this cave. There's a cave, and in this cave there's this pool. And writers like Flavius Josephus will say, like, no man knows the bottom of it. Like, like he has accounts. Nowadays we know how deep it is, but then he has accounts of like, oh, we lowered rope and it was so many knots and we never hit the bottom. But the way that they would use this cave, and the theory is too that this cave being in the bowels of this mountain, that certain gases would come out of the earth, and it was very toxic. But they would take their animal sacrifice, and they would throw it into this water, this pool, and if the sacrifice sunk, that means that Pan accepted your sacrifice. That Hades, the underworld, or Sheol, accepted your sacrifice. And if it floats, that just means that they're not happy, right? So all of this story is really backlogged and has the baggage of all of this kind of semblance. It would have been like Azkaban or something like today, right? Most people would look at that place and be like, oh, that's haunted, don't go there, or something like that. But for those people who are very supernaturally minded, they would have in their mind, like, that is literally the door to hell.
Right.
And I think that, Creek, before you go, there is some like, in other scriptures, ideas where these people seem to think that, like, portals to hell are in water. Like the demoniac that we talked about on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, send us not into the abyss. Their mind is just kind of linked in that way. So when Jesus makes this statement and he's saying, the gates of hell will not prevail against the confession or what's going to happen on this mountain, it has real life semblance to them. It's really hitting something to them. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's good too, and we've got a lot more details on it too.
Yeah.
But it's to simplify it. we would say that these gods that they're worshiping are real entities.
Yeah.
Whatever they are. Probably that these people didn't just stumble upon this and make this up. Is kind of what we would say here at this podcast.
This place is supernaturally charged.
Yes, there is actual supernatural. This isn't like just they thought that. Like this, there is a lot going on here.
I think. Go ahead.
Dr. Judd's most recent work on this subject has him where he is, by certain clues in the text, kind of deduced where he thinks that there's this big Pan festival going on at the time that Jesus and his disciples are coming to this area. So you would have people coming from all over to do this big festival, and they would dance and have, whatever they did, but on this mountain. So it would also have an audience of people that are not Jews. They're not good Jews.
Right.
These are people who are very pagan in their belief, and I think that kind of adds to the weight of the event we're covering today.
Well, and there's something on that supernatural element that I think is interesting to point out too, is that this hasn't just been historically an occultic site or like a woo-woo place for the Romans. But if you recount back to Joshua, and when the Israelites come into the land of Canaan, they begin conquest. Of course, like Trey said, our particular view of Genesis chapter 6 is what I would say is the traditionalist view. We take the supernatural outlook that the sons of God are a class of divine being that had children with human women, and the offspring were the giants. They were the Nephilim and their progeny, their generational offspring and descendants. And the Jewish culture had also believed that that's where disembodied giants or dead giants is where demons come from, where unclean spirits, or they would call them bastard spirits that have no father because their fathers are in chains awaiting judgment.
Yeah.
That's where all of these terminologies sort of come about. And I think that's important to notice, because the first time that Mount Hermon gets mentioned in a conquest fashion, Joshua and the Israelites are coming to fight not just against the giants in the land in general, but against King Og, who reigns in Bashan, who reigns on Mount Hermon.
Who, by the way, has an iron bed that's 16 feet. This dude is huge. He's a giant, and there's a bad SOB.
Right. And just to sort of back up what Trey was saying, this bed matches the dimensions to the ritual bed of Marduk, the Babylonian deity that had all of these, supernatural offspring. He would meet with his divine consort in this bed, and they would do this stuff. So Og, like having this bed on this worship site, was basically a way of trying to solidify himself as like, I am a child of the gods in every way, appointed to rule you.
Like a descendant of Marduk.
Yeah.
Like he is my progeny.
Well, we know him as a knockoff son of God. You're not the son of God. You're a fake.
You're a son of
poser.
A lower G God.
Yeah, Satan counterfeits.
Exactly.
Like all of this stuff is all counterfeit of what God desires.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, sort of on a fringy note, that all of these places of worship, and you'll notice throughout the text, I mean, we read several of them when we went through the Kings and Chronicles. They're always picking high places. And we talked about that stuff earlier on in Genesis.
Ziggurats, all of it.
Always building high places to the gods and worshiping the gods on high places and all that. And even Eden itself is characterized in Ezekiel not just as a garden, but also as a mountain.
Yeah,
a
garden on a mountain.
Yeah, this place where God has made heaven on earth, where heaven and earth are in harmony together, which of course is no longer the case. But that being said, it is just kind of interesting, like when you talk about that pool, how the abyss, how the ancient mind would look at these things, and the Romans look at this site that used to be a worship site to Baal and to Marduk and all of these other Canaanite gods and Mesopotamian gods, and they erect one to Pan in the same space, make sacrifices in the same space, make claims in the same kind of way, with the religion that is exactly the same, with the only thing different being the names.
It's kind of harrowing. Yeah, I mean, instead of Azazel, you have, the this goat god Pan. But even the location name known as Bashan, Og of Bashan, right? I mean, you get certain prophetic utterances in like the Psalms where David will say like that the bulls of Bashan surround me. They have encompassed me. And so it connects that whole area with, first of all, Og and his progenies, the Rephaim, and those after him they're demonic. It's demonic forces, it's spiritual forces. And this place is just pregnant.
The backdrop, The backdrop's pregnant with meaning.
sorry, DJB, I had to do it to you. But it's all of this stuff matters. Context is key. It always matters.
Yeah. Well, and it's especially important because, in Matthew 17 and his telling of the transfiguration, when Jesus, before that, when Peter makes this confession that Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus says, Simon, son of Jonah, blessed are you, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. I now call you Peter. On this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. And then he says this, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And you get this on the backside of this confession of the lordship of Jesus, that Jesus is giving authority to his followers to wage spiritual war in a different kind of way.
We hope you're enjoying the show. If you are, give us a rating, review, and send this podcast over to a friend. If you want to contact us, email us at thetablepodcastmail@gmail.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, and any other podcasting platform. Ask us about merch, recommend topics or interviews, or just tell us what you think of the episode. Thank you for listening. Now, let's get back into the show.
So a lot of it has been made about this confession of Peter, like early church, or what is considered like capital C or RC, Roman Catholic Church. They would say that this is God making Peter the Pope. I think that is less. I do think that there's some authority in apostleship, and he seems to be like the kind of the leader of the apostles just because I think he's older and he's got that demeanor and attitude. But I don't think that that's God instituting an office. I think that this is more about the location and the confession.
Yeah.
The rock is this church that is going to invade hell's territory. That it's going to take the kingdom of heaven and take cosmic geography from hell. It's built on this confession that Jesus is the anointed one of God.
Well, and you've got this talk from Jesus. The Son of Man must suffer many things by the scribes and Pharisees, be condemned to death, and rise on the third day. The gates of hell, or the gates of death, not prevailing against this church that he's going to build.
Yeah.
Like he's beginning to talk about this Isaiah stuff that we've been mentioning in Isaiah 25. Like there's some forecast by Jesus in a more direct way that and the way that we read that in the King James, death will not prevail against it, makes it seem that like death is on the offensive. But the way that this language reads is the opposite.
Yeah.
It means that death will be overcome by this church.
And what this
by
is,
the work of Jesus and the confession of
this
his
is Jesus going into the territory of the enemy, probably the most loaded place on planet Earth as far as like enemy territory. The mountain of the gods, where they descended and where they've ruled, mankind spiritually, and where they're worshipped. And he's going to this place, and about this location, he says, on this rock, on this mountain, I will build my church.
Yeah.
And two things. I think it's literal that on this rock, this is on that confession, the church is going to be built here, but also it has to do with the fact that, like, what is going to take place here is extremely significant. And for the enemy, like, it's a diss. It's like a shot. Yeah. It's like, it's begging them, come after me, and it's almost like enticing them. Because he's just made this confession and talked about, right, how, like, the Son of Man's going to suffer many things and he's going to actually die, but he's going to be resurrected. And it's almost like begging the enemy. He's like, come on. Yeah, I'm here. I'm the Son of God on your mountain, and what's about to happen.
It really kind of makes you think of, like, the stories, like, of Jehoshaphat when Sennacherib would come down to the city gate and holler over the city gate.
Yeah.
Come get some.
Yeah.
Right? Except in this case, it's the opposite. Like, the good guys coming to their gate and saying, let's get it.
He said, is there no one else?
Something that you said, while we're still kind of on the topic of cosmic geography and cosmic warfare and stuff, spiritual geography and spiritual warfare. Psalm 68, verse 15 says this, O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan, why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mount that God desired for his abode? Yes, where the Lord will dwell forever. The chariots of God are twice 10,000, thousands upon thousands. The Lord is among them. Sinai is now in the sanctuary. You descended on high, leading a host of captives in your train and receiving gifts among men, even among the rebellious, that the Lord God may dwell there. So you've got, like, this idea in the Psalms. First of all, the many-peaked mountain of Bashan clearly being Mount Hermon, right? But that the mountain is looking at God's mountain, God's abode, with hatred. Check this out, though. It says the Lord is among them. Sinai is now in the sanctuary.
Yeah.
So you have, in my mind at least, the blending of Sinai with Mount Zion.
Yeah.
Zion is now God's abode.
The Temple Mountain.
This is where God lives. This is his seat, right? But Sinai is where he was first seated, in the way that he revealed himself to man in that way, at least after Eden. So the major mountains that we have in procession, minus, maybe the mountains of Mamre with Abraham or something, which actually is in this general area as well of Jerusalem. In fact, where Abraham offered up Isaac would become the same spot of the temple that's built by Solomon, David's son.
Temple Mount.
Yeah. So all of this stuff is kind of blended together, but you have, like, sort of pictured, and of course you ask yourself, how can a actual mountain look at another actual mountain with hatred?
Yeah.
Well, this kind of, it's metaphorical. It goes back to this cosmic geography that we're talking about, is that these would-be rivals to God, these attempted usurpers, and I say would-be and attempted because it's folly. There is no victory when you war with the Almighty, hence the term Almighty. But it's this idea that they've set themselves, like Creek said so beautifully, a fake copy and contrasted it against God's abode.
Yeah.
So God has this group, this council, if you will, this divine council, and then he has men, he has these subjects, and I'm failing at this miserably, but when in the Baal epics,
council,
Baal is one of the sons of El, and he sets his throne up on Mount Hermon, and from Mount Hermon he picks his ruler, and they rule the world. And it's this cheap knockoff, but it's this idea that ultimately what's being attacked is not mountain against mountain, but it is principality against principality,
kingdom
and
against
spirit
kingdom.
against spirit, and a kingdom against another kingdom.
Yeah, this demonic supernatural realm is obsessed with high places.
Yes.
Obsessed with building up to God and being like God.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing. And it's all
super good.
Reminds me of that. He said to himself that I will send my throne, above the stars of the Most High.
Which is kind of like mimicked in Genesis 11 too, right? Where they're like, let us build a city that reaches up to heaven so that we can't be flooded from the earth anymore. Let's show God he can't just do to us whatever he wants.
And somehow, like you talk about Og of Bashan and stuff, like somehow they knew that Mount Hermon was where certain events would take place. Don't ask me how that all works.
Right.
But for some reason, they like this mountain.
I think that honestly, it's because like we have desupernaturalized the world to where like we think that, well, you know, it's kind of like what we talked about earlier. These weren't real entities. That was just, you know, that was just their creative imagination. But if Og really is a descendant of Marduk, and he's in contact with his progeny in some way, shape, or form, and then it's easy to understand how like he would lay claim to this area, to this mountain. Yeah. It's easy to understand that stuff, and I think that like that confession that's being made, and we're going to get a little bit deeper into what happens because they're about to go up the mountain, and God's going to do something amazing on this place. But there's so much just backed into this that if you don't understand this, then you're going to misunderstand what the transfiguration really is and the purpose. And it's after this moment that our snake crusher is going to set his eyes towards a certain city, and he's going to start moving in that direction with a purpose. Yeah. Like this moment is the fulcrum on which everything hinges, because after this, he sets his face like flint.
You know, two things that are really cool before we move into that. Like, so first of all, you have this, like in Psalm 68 and verse 17, it says, the chariots of God are twice 10,000, thousands upon thousands. The Lord is among them. Sinai is in the sanctuary. So you got this picture, like really of Jesus standing at the gates of Bashan, at the gates of Hades, and who are his forces? I mean, obviously this talks about like spiritual forces, but in the natural eye, so to speak, you have Jesus and his 12, right? Well, in one of the chapters of one of the Gospels accounts, I want to say that it's Luke's account. Above the transfiguration, towards the beginning of the chapter, is the 12 being sent out and commissioned with authority.
Yeah, the sending of the
they've been
72.
No, this is the 12.
He's talking about that.
Yeah. They've been empowered with authority, and you get this idea in Psalm 68 that God commands an overwhelming force.
Yeah,
imagine thousands upon 10,000s, twice 10,000 chariots. In the ancient Near East, it is inconceivable that a force can be raised of that magnitude, nevertheless be beaten. And you have Jesus at this gate that's saying, we're going to overwhelm you. Yeah. The church, the army that I am building,
the kingdom,
will barrage the gates of Hades. Hades will be completely overrun and overtaken.
Of the kingdom. The way he says that, for the kingdom of heaven has come down.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Well, they've set their kingdom on this mountain. Like they have tried to overrun this mountain. It's all sorts of, we've talked about the symbolism, but this is a power move. This is like the real Son of God is here. The real Son of God is on this mountain where he belongs, not you fake counterfeits who require temple prostitution and child sacrifice and like the real lamb who is the real sacrifice is here. Like,
dude, and check this out. In verse 20 of Psalm 68, it says, our God is a God of salvation, and to God of the Lord belong deliverances from death. But God will strike the heads of his enemies. Yeah. Remember this old Genesis 3:15 thing. God will strike the heads of his enemies, the hairy crown of him who walks in his guilty ways. The Lord said, I will bring them back from Bashan. I will bring them back from the depths of the sea, that you may strike your feet in their blood, and the tongues of your dogs may have their portion from the foe. Your procession is seen, O God, the procession of my God, my King, into the sanctuary. Singers in front, the musicians last. I'm going to skip a few verses because this is so cool. Check this out, dude. Verse 32 of Psalm 68. O kingdoms of the earth, sing to God. Sing praises to the Lord. To him who rides in the heavens, the ancient heavens. Behold, he sends out his voice, his mighty voice. Ascribe power to God, whose majesty is over Israel, whose power in the skies. Awesome is God from his sanctuary. The God of Israel, he is the one who gives power and strength to his people. Blessed be God. So, first of all, there's like a deity epithet against Baal, right?
Yeah.
In the Baal epic, it calls him a cloud rider, right?
Yeah.
Well, in Psalm 68, it says that God is the one who rides in the ancient heavens.
Yeah.
He rides on the clouds. He commands all of the power of the skies, and that he gives strength and power to his people. And this whole thing is like kind of contextualized in this confession of Christ's lordship and of his ascribing to him this power and ascribing majesty to the God of Israel, empowering his people to go out and subdue as well.
It's good.
It's like you said, it's a shot across the bow and a gauntlet thrown down at the kingdom of darkness. Like, let's get it in.
I have one more comment to make on this, and then I'm going to switch gears if that's okay with you guys. But, Jesus is often called in the Gospels. This snake crusher is called the Son of David. Well, if we remember, David had a battle against a giant. And his name was Goliath. And how did he kill him? But he struck him in the head.
Yeah.
He kind of has that Psalm 68 vibe, right? He strikes him dead in the head. But the important part is we learn in that story that Goliath is one of these descendants from this Og of Bashan that we're talking about. He is a part of this lineage of this supernatural giant enemy, the sons of the lowercase g gods. And so, like, with that whole event, you have the greater son of David who is not going to fight one giant, but he's going to their place, and all of their disembodied spirits, all of their bastard spirits, and he declares war on them. And that's where in the Psalms it says that, the bulls of Bashan have surrounded me. Like, that idea is going to be there. But switching gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit more about what actually happens on the mountain.
Yeah,
so
that's good.
There is like a reflection of a couple other stories in this, and it just so happens that the two people that are in those other stories are on this mountain.
Yeah.
So Jesus goes up. He only takes 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, John. They go separately, and they start going up this mountain. He goes up, and it says that he was transformed, transfigured. His clothes are whiter than any white could be, and his face shines. Well, all of you guys that went through the Old Testament with us should call to memory somebody else who went up a mountain and his face was transfigured, so much so that I believe it was for 40 days he had to wear a veil because people couldn't stand to look at his face. It was so bright, the radiant. So I want to clue back to that story. Then I think Creek's going to hit the other character. But in this story where Moses goes up this mountain, the mountain of Sinai, we already read the connections between there that are made in the Psalms. He goes up the mountain of Sinai, the mountain of God. And there's a great fire on the mountain. God has encompassed this mountain. His glory has come down on it. And Moses has a meeting. And John's hinted at this actually a couple episodes ago. We kind of talked about this a little bit. But he has a meeting with God. And you may have to help me with the words, the word difference. But he goes up and he has a request. And he makes a request of God. He says, God, I want to see your glory, Yahweh. I want to see your glory. And I think that the Hebrew word is kavod. Kavod.
Yeah.
And then, so God makes a statement back to him, and he says, well, Moses, no one can see my face and live. No man. Yeah. If you see my face, it'll burn you up. My glory is too strong. But I'll put you in the cleft of the rock, and I'll cover you with my hand. And as I lead, or he makes a statement, I will make my goodness to pass before you, which is Panine.
Yeah,
Panine?
My Panai.
My Panai, I will make my goodness pass before you. And then you have this moment where Yahweh says, my goodness, and he covers him with his hand, he walks off, and Moses is allowed to see the train of Yahweh's glory, his goodness. Moses comes off this mountain, and his face is transfigured in the same way.
Yeah.
His face glows so bright that the people make him wear a veil so that they don't have to look at it because it's blinding to them. Moses is one of the people that Jesus meets on this mountain.
Yeah, yeah.
And the next character,
Moses and Elijah,
is Elijah. Creek, you want to read a little bit out of 1 Kings?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple more comments on the Moses thing to tie it all together. The context of that, Moses goes back up to Mount Sinai after, the golden calf situation. the Israelites are on the bottom of the mountain making the golden calf. So this, however, Satan's kingdom did this, whatever, but they're doing the same crap that they.
There's a bull of Bashan
yes,
below the mountain.
yes, there's a bull of Bashan that Israel has created.
Out of gold.
Moses is on the mountain.
That's so crazy.
But, something that God says to Moses is, I will personally go with you, Moses, and I will give you rest. Everything will be fine for you. God shows Moses the glory. His face shines. But the story of Elijah is very similar. Elijah just has battled the prophets of Baal. And slays all of his prophets.
How many wasn't it like 700 total or something like that?
Yeah, 700.
I thought it was 300, but
I thought it was like 400 prophets of Baal and 400 of Ashtoreth or something.
who knows?
Yeah, 700 total.
There's a lot.
Jinx.
Jinx.
Elijah's tired from the crap.
A little bit depressed.
He says, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors.
Man.
And what does God do? The same thing that he does with Moses. He gives him rest. Eat this. Take a nap. Chill out.
I love that. God tells me that sometimes.
God appears to Elijah. It says, then a powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then after the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant as they did before, torn down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. Long story short, God has saved 7,000 in Israel, whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him. So to tie this all together, Elijah also sees God.
It says that he stands in the presence of God. He ascends the mountain, walks 40 days to Horeb, which is Sinai.
Yeah.
And he sees God in the whisper. And so,
It's kind of the goodness.
There's these points where it's like, God has conquered this place. This is still God's. This is still God's. Israel seemed to have left, but here he is, still in the same place. And so Jesus doing this same thing, his countenance being changed, like it's like a combination of what's happened. It's like Jesus is now going to give you rest. This mountain has been redeemed in a way.
Yeah.
Like there's no more, there is no more. The kingdom of darkness has not conquered this place.
And if you think you have, come get some.
This is literally by the gates of hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
atop them.
And this place, this is not hell. This isn't, hell has not conquered this place. And so.
And the valley of Bashan is like infamous for demonic activity.
Right. And
viewed like as the Israelites to be like the cosmic wilderness. This is not a place where you travel alone.
You see, and Moses and Elijah are both here while Jesus is here in the same place that they saw him many years ago.
Something that's amazing to me too.
800, or maybe more, 1,000, something like that.
Something like that, yeah. It's like that you have, like in the story of Moses at Sinai, right? Or at Horeb, the first trip to Horeb. He encounters the angel of the presence standing in a burning bush, and the voice speaks to him and commissions him to go to Egypt after he has been wandering, or after he has been in Midian for 40 years, if my time frame here is right. And then like all of these stories like kind of blending together, like Elijah's here, and there's like wind, and it kind of brings to my mind the Hebrew that God would come in the wind of the day, and then he would speak with Adam, right? So this wind comes and shakes the mountain, and then there's presence of fire, and then there's a voice. And there's always a blending of those things, like even with God coming to Sinai.
Yeah, fire descended on the mountain.
Peals of lightning and fire and smoke like covers the face of the mountain.
Man.
And nobody can see Moses because he's in it, but he's speaking with the presence of God,
so
right?
Good.
Yeah.
And, Moses and Elijah are both like who we would see as mighty men of God.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like they're probably the two most quote unquote powerful figures
Prominent.
in the Old Testament.
Definitely.
One was taken up, didn't taste death. The other one died very strangely as well.
Yeah, there's a contention over
yeah, there's
it.
a little, I don't know.
Little Jude stuff in there that makes it kind of weird.
Right.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
regardless, both of them had very mysterious endings on Earth, and they're both back. So it's kind of just this, this wrapping up of thing. It all wraps up nicely.
And it's kind of interesting. Sorry, Trey, just to think like that. Moses is not only responsible for being used by God to bring the Exodus about, the bringing out of the Israelites from bondage, and in this sort of same context of Luke and Mark and Matthew. Especially in Matthew, Jesus says it, like, whatever you bind on earth will then be bound in heaven. What you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So you've got like a complete and total inverse, it seems, of like, I am empowering you to, your confession of me as the solution to the problem, let me phrase it that way, is going to empower you to go and see the solution of the problem realized in the earth.
Man.
Like the undoing of cosmic bondage that leads to physical bondage, because they were exiled because of sin, right? They were exiled into Babylon because of sin. And something else I don't know. Trey, you were going to say something.
Just to make some more comparisons between these two figures that meet with Jesus, both of them are at war with the gods.
Yeah.
With the pagan gods. Moses is told by God, I will make you like a god to them, and I am going to bring plagues, and I'm going to judge the gods of Egypt through you. And Elijah, right before this episode, he 300, however many, 700, however many there were, hundreds of prophets of Baal, he slays with the sword. And fire comes down. So you have Moses, his first meeting with God, 40 days, or 40 years, and then burning bush, fire on the mountain. Elijah, he has this meeting with God, fire, burns up the altar, kills the prophets of Baal, travels 40 days and 40 nights to this mountain, where a great fire hits the mountain, an earthquake, a mighty wind, all the Sinai things come together. And it says that he stood in the presence of God. And you have this moment where when he comes out of the cave, he puts his tunic over his face.
Yeah.
It's very clear to mention that, which is weird, but it connects those two stories even further. Yeah. And so there's a theory, and it's just a theory. So call this the myth-conspiracy theory.
I knew we'd get into it.
Yeah, it's really good. A friend of mine did an episode on his podcast, a friend of our show, Brandon Spain, with the Unrefined podcast. He did an episode on this, and this guy wrote a book on it, and one of these days we're going to get him on because it's really cool. But in this theory, that Moses, when he goes up Sinai, and when Elijah, when he goes up Sinai, and then Jesus, when he goes up Hermon, all three of them have an encounter. And the theory kind of posits that the moment that these people go up the mountain of God and they enter into his presence, that they are pulled out of time and space. And that the very moment that they're doing this, where Moses is being shown the goodness of God and Elijah is standing in the presence of God, that they are going up the mountain at the same time as Jesus is going up the mountain, and that they meet with him physically, and Moses gets to see God's goodness, and Elijah gets to stand in the presence of God, and it transfigures all three of them.
Yeah.
And you have this moment where these disciples are watching this and are like, oh, we should build a temple. But it's also clear to know, too, that at this moment with Jesus, it says that a dark cloud comes overhead and a voice comes from the cloud.
From heaven.
Mountain, fire. All of the elements are here in this story. And God says, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him.
Yeah.
Listen to what he has to say. And so it's just an incredible moment that in the deepest, darkest camp of the enemy, that God shows himself sovereign over them, but Baal isn't saying anything in this.
Yeah.
Pan isn't saying anything in this. But there's a moment that seems to, at least in this theory that we're putting forward, it seems to go outside of time and space, and where God meets with these three people at once.
Dude, that's something that in Elijah's story, like Baal is silent, and the agreement is the God that answers by fire, let him be God,
Man.
right? And then he comes down and consumes this sacrifice. Piggybacking on what you guys are saying, I just want to kind of skim through Exodus 34, like just cherry pick it real light. Some stuff stuck out to me, and just in the context of everything we're talking about. Verse 1 says, the Lord said to Moses, cut for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first. I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Be ready by morning, come up in the morning to Sinai, present yourself before me there on the top of the mountain. No one will come up with you. So he tells him, and it calls it these tablets of the testimony. Bring these tablets of testifying. And on Mount Hermon, here's 2 things that are testifying, so to speak, to the deity of Jesus, right? Something else that was kind of cool, that stuck out, right, is the Lord descended, verse 5 says, in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, which we know is the divine name, Yahweh, Yahweh, God gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but will by no means clear the guilty, but visit the iniquity of the fathers to the children, children's children, and to the 3rd and 4th generation. And they bow their heads to the earth and worshipped. And then Moses is like, if I have found favor with you, go with me, but don't send me up with this stiff-necked people without you. You know what I mean? And then he said, behold, I'm making a covenant, in verse 10, before all your people I will do marvels, such as never been created in all the earth or in any nation. And all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I command you. I'll drive out the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Take care lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they be a snare in your midst. You will tear down their altars, break their pillars, and cut their asherim.
Come on.
For you will worship no other God, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. And you've got this, again, this picture in the Transfiguration gates of hell scene. There's sacrifices being conducted to other gods behind them.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus takes 3 with him up this mountain, right? They see him be transfigured and his face is shining, resembling the same one that brought a covenant back then, who we know is ultimately going to bring a covenant now.
Yeah.
Right? And there's war declared. And in this context of this in Exodus, there's breaking down of false gods, right? That are a representation of these spirits that are being overthrown. And then, of course, at the end of this chapter, you have Moses' face and skin shining and him having to put this veil over. And it was just kind of interesting that sandwiched in between is the keeping of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And the Sabbath of giving rest.
I guess kind of tying a bow on this, because there's so much here. I mean, we could go for another hour, but I almost see it as like 3 people on 3 journeys going up the same mountain from different sides. They all meet, and then when they leave, God's presence goes with all of them. Because who's waiting for Moses when he's going down the mountain? Joshua, Yeshua.
Right.
I mean, there's so much symbolism there, and they all go forth from that moment with the divine edict: go make war on my enemies,
and they're
tear down their altars, tear down their high places, break them up, go down, go from here with authority to conquer.
And this is a small thing, but it also seems like they're all refreshed.
Yeah,
like they're all rested. They all have like God has touched them.
Yeah,
it's like this. In fact, Elijah, I think, asked God to touch him. So God has touched them all, given them this, and they go, and they do their thing.
I think that the way that we should end this episode is just with a little bit of a foreshadow, because we've talked about how this is like a declaration of war on behalf of our snake crusher, Jesus. And what remains to be answered is, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I've come into your territory. I've settled, this is the place I'll build my church, been transfigured, God speaks from heaven, and he's going to leave this place with a mission in mind, one that he hinted at to his disciples. He kind of gave them the key,
Yeah.
but there's no inclination that the enemy knows this. And so, what are you going to do? War's been declared. The proverbial gauntlet has been thrown down.
He's also told them not to say anything.
So. Yeah, that's a fire point, bro.
Dude, check this out. Verse 14 of Mark 9, the disciples come. There's like this great crowd, and scribes are arguing with the disciples that are left down there. Jesus is like, what you're arguing about with them? And it's a guy, someone from the crowd answers, Teacher, I brought my son to you because he has a spirit that makes him mute. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him down and grinds his teeth, and he foams at the mouth and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they weren't able. And it's funny because Jesus asked them this question that doesn't really seem to be like normal in the pattern. Verse 21, he asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, since he was a child. And Jesus ultimately casts this spirit out and says something in detail that's cool. You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. So there's like this continued protection. I come out of him now, but never come back.
In other places, he says, don't sin anymore, it's coming back.
Or they're going to go wandering through dry places, and if they come back and find their house ready for them to come back into, they're going to go grab company and come back, and it's going to get worse. But I don't know. It was just cool, like you said, that on the back of the very next thing that happened, Mark's gospel and Luke's gospel say the next day they come down from the mountain. They encounter one of these spirits oppressing people, and Jesus drives it away and says, not only leave, but leave and never come back.
It's good. Well, I think that we're about out of time for today. We went longer than... As always.
This was supposed to be a short one.
Yeah, it always is. We always go longer than we're supposed to. But, hey, I hope that you all enjoy that. And if you don't, why don't you just write us a letter and tell us to shut up?
Get over it.
Yeah, just shut up.
Just don't rate us 1 star on Spotify.
Why? Don't even bring that up, dog. Only 5 stars.
Trey's over here like Job. The thing I feared will come upon me.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to get 1 star.
Well, we actually only have 1 bad review. We have more ratings and reviews than any other show our size, and they're all 5 star. So eat it.
I want to see this bad review now.
It was a person that I know, and they didn't even do it on purpose.
Oh,
it was Allie Wadley.
You need to get on to her.
I was like, no, go back and re-rate it. She said, well, I tried, but it won't take it away. I'm like, delete your account.
Anyway,
well, from all of us here at the Table Podcast, we bid you adieu and Godspeed.
Bless ya.
Catch you later.
This is Pastor Kevin O'Connor, and you're listening to At the Table Podcast.
This is Dylan from Jamaica, and you're listening to At the Table Podcast.
Hello, this is Dr. Kent Hovind of Dinosaur Adventureland, and with the At the Table Podcast.
Hey, this is Savannah Donaldson, and you're listening to At the Table Podcast.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of At the Table Podcast. We hope it blessed you, and we hope it taught you something. Until next time, thank you so much, and God bless.